Good evening, advanced math. Time to, we've been dealing with negative numbers for a little while now, and we understand them well, so it's time to start doing some operations with them. So we're going to start off by adding integers today, and it's going to be the first of a couple of strategies I teach you. So we need a whole new page. This is a whole new unit, even if you want to have like a whole operations with negatives unit section. We're in like a whole new territory today. And if you would like to make that the first page in your new section, there it is. Please do that and unpause when you're ready and just give me your full concentration for the IDs. So we talked last unit about opposites, right? Like negative 2 and 2 are opposites. So are like negative 11 and positive 11. They're numbers with the same distance from 0 in the opposite direction. And so before we start adding any two integers we want, the first thing I want to do is talk to you about adding opposites. So if I were to take two opposite numbers and add them together, like negative 2 and 2, think of this as like negative 2 is like you owe $2. And then adding 2 is like you get $2. And if you owed $2 and then you got $2, you would essentially have $0, right? Because you would have to give the 2 you got to whoever you owed $2 to. And same with like 11. Like if you had $11 and you add to that a debt of $11 that you owe somebody, you basically have no dollars. If you just as a concept, if you have the same amount of money that you owe somebody, you'd have to give the $11 that you had to the person you owed, and you wouldn't have any. So anytime you add two opposites, you get 0. And so that's going to be important in the lesson today, so I just want you to think that through, like negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 2 and negative 2, 0. 12 and negative 12, 0. Negative 113 plus 113 is 0. It's just like owing the same amount of money that you have basically means you're starting from 0. So that's going to be important in our topic today. So let's talk about adding some negative numbers. So I'm going to start by adding these. So I'm going to add negative 6 plus negative 2. And so my first strategy, I'm going to use symbols, or you could use red and yellow counters to do the same thing. So if I'm going to add negative 6 and negative 2, I'm going to draw each number. I'm going to say, well, negative 6 is 6 negative signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's negative 6, like negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6. Okay? And if I add to that negative 2, so negative 2 would look like this. It would be two negative signs. So remember, when I'm adding two things, I put them together. So I basically take these and I take these and think of it like I'm putting them in a big bag and just kind of shaking them up. Like I'm putting them together. I'm putting negative 6 and negative 2 together. And when I do, when they're all together here, I look and say, well, what do I have when I put them all together? And when I look at what I have and I put them all together, I have negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 different negative signs in my bag. So negative 6 plus negative 2 is negative 8. If I look at that and rearranged it, if I really just kind of took these, I don't know if I can do it, but no, can't do it. If I put them all together, nope. I would just move these, just think of it like putting together. I take these two negatives and I put them with these two, and all together I have negative 8. Pretty simple, like I just combine my signs and count them up. So that's what happens if I have the same sign. Super easy. You just kind of combine them all. If I have different signs, I'm going to do the same thing. It's just going to end up a little different. So let's look at like negative 4 plus positive 7. So I'm going to take these two things. This is negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to combine that or put that with or add to that positive 7. So it's positive 7. And again, think of it like you're taking all this and you're putting it in a bag and you're shaking it up or something like that. You're just combining it, pushing it all together into one set of stuff. So when I put it into one set of stuff, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to make opposite pairs. If you notice, I can take these 4 negatives and I could pair those up with 4 positives, right? I could say that is negative 4 plus positive 4, which we know from back at the Connect, the whole point was if you ever add a number to its opposite, you get 0, right? So when I shake up the bag, so to speak, I'm going to put these 4 negatives with these 4 positives, and so all of this is going to equal 0. Like these like cancel out. This is like a negative positive pair, negative positive pair, negative positive pair, negative positive pair. So all this, excuse me, all this ends up being 0, and so then I have 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3. So I end up with that equals 0 and that equals 3, and so negative 4 plus 7 is positive 3. Because all these make a 0. These 4 of these and these 4 of these make a 0. And I add to that these 3 positives that don't have a 0 to be made. 3. So negative 4 plus 7 is 3. Alright? So hopefully that's kind of clear. Let's do some together. And hopefully by the time we do a few together, you'll be a little more used to it. Let's start with opposites. I just want you to start in your notebook by reminding yourself when you add opposites, you get 0. It's like negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 2 plus negative 2 is 0. 5 plus negative 5 is 0. Negative 26 plus 26 is 0. I just want you to remember that. This is like you owe $26, and this is like you have $26, and if you owe the same amount that you have, you got to give the 26 you have to the person that you owe, which means you have 0. So if you remember that you can always add up opposites and get 0, adding integers is pretty easy. All right? So let's start with a same signs example. So this is negative 1 plus negative 6. Now let me take a quick pause here. Signs can get really confusing, right? If I write negative 1 plus negative 6 like this, it starts to look really confusing when I have two signs together like that, plus then minus together. So usually what you'll see people do to avoid that is one thing is they'll write it like I did, where you, instead of writing, negative 1 plus negative 6 where everything's in the middle, negative signs kind of go up high plus negative sign up high. That's one way you'll see people kind of distinguish a negative sign from an operation minus sign, is they'll put the negative signs up high and the operation signs in the middle. That's a little less confusing. The other thing you'll see people do is put them in parentheses. You might see like negative 1 plus negative 6 written like that. And that's the same thing as this. It just kind of sets apart that this is a negative 6 rather than a minus operation 6. So that's just an aside. To avoid anything confusing like that, you'll usually see negative signs written one of these ways so it doesn't get weird. All right. So, to my operations, I have negative 1 plus negative 6. And you'll see I wrote the negative sign kind of up high. So negative 1 looks like this. Negative 6 looks like this. And when I take those and combine them, I combine one negative sign with 6 negative signs. I end up with 7 negative signs. So negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. Simple. When you add a negative to more negatives, you just get even more negatives. Negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7. There's nothing, there's no zeros to be made there or anything. Just equals negative 7. Let's do one more. When you have different signs, it works a little differently. So again, you'll notice I kind of set my negative 8 apart. I could write this as 5 plus negative 8, or I could write this as 5 plus negative 8, so that the negative sign doesn't look like a minus sign. I wouldn't want to write this. That looks confusing. So you won't see people write plus minus together. It'll either be with parentheses or kind of like that. I just don't want it to confuse you. It's just so it doesn't look weird. All right. So positive 5 looks like this. Negative 8 looks like this. You'll notice I'm lining my negative signs up with my positive signs on purpose. Right? So there's my 5 plus negative 8. And I do that so when I kind of combine them together, I'm going to combine 5 negatives with 5 positives. When I look at that, and that's 5 plus negative 5 equals 0. So this whole thing equals 0 right here. When I dump everything in the bag and shake it up, these 5 pluses and these 5 minuses, those add up to 0. And then I'm left with negative 3. So 5 plus negative 8 equals those. Negative 3 is how it works. And that's the first strategy. I think it's a pretty simple one. That's the first strategy for how you add positive and negative numbers. You just write down some signs for each number, and if there's anything that makes a 0, you kind of packages up, make your 0, and see what you have left. In some cases, there's not. In this case, there's nothing that goes together to make a 0, so you just combine them and put them together, and that's it. So that's the first strategy for how you add integers. Sorry, I keep coughing. Hope that's pretty clear. If you need to go back and watch any of these examples again to get a good grasp on this, please do. Can't wait to see you tomorrow.